This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
New York governor authorizes seizure and redistribution of ventilators, masks and other medical equipment after nearly 3,000 people succumbed to coronavirus in New York in the last 24 hours. This as COVID-19 cases continue to escalate in many parts of the world amid concerted efforts to curb the spread of the coronavirus. We have comprehensive details of these and other developments. A very warm welcome to Africa Live, coming to you live from Nairobi. I am Peninah Karibe. Let's begin the hour in the United States, where New York State Governor Andrew Cuomo now says he would sign an executive order which gives power to the state to seize and redistribute medical equipment. The order, if there will be any, will see hospitals and private sector or companies lose medical supplies and equipment like masks and ventilators. Governor Cuomo also said he would not care about the legal implications. At the same time, the New York State has set up a makeshift morgue for the increasing number of coronavirus victims. The state has lost more people to the disease in the last 24 hours compared to deaths recorded in the first 27 days. CGTN's Giles Gibson now joins me from New York for more on the unfolding situation there. Giles, very significant developments for New York as the coronavirus spreads in the U.S. What more can you tell us about the latest numbers?
Well, New York State generally is still very much the epicenter of this outbreak in the United States. According to the CDC, which is the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, New York State currently has about 85,000 cases of identified COVID-19, and the state has also recorded around 3,000 deaths. Now, New York City itself is really the epicenter of the epicenter, if you like. We've seen about half of those 3,000 deaths within the borders of New York City itself, and that's why we're seeing the governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, taking these pretty extraordinary measures to try and reassign the medical resources that are currently in his state and are desperately needed by patients with COVID-19.
And if the New York governor's seizure and redistribution order for critical medical supplies is implemented, what's the response likely to be from the federal government and the affected hospitals?
Well, at his daily briefing, Andrew Cuomo, the governor of New York, explained his rationale for this decision. He said that he's not going to be in a position where people are dying and we have several hundred ventilators in our own state somewhere else. In terms of how medical institutions are going to react to this executive order that we're expecting to be signed a little bit later on, we do understand that these supplies which are taken from medical institutions in other parts of the state will either be returned to those medical institutions and those hospitals, or those hospitals or medical institutions will be reimbursed for the equipment that is reassigned perhaps to New York City, for example, which, as I was saying before, is seeing such a spike in cases.
And Giles, how are these developments likely to shape the response strategies against COVID-19 in the U.S.?
Well, we're expecting one significant shift in terms of the tactics from the White House on this. We are expecting them to issue an advisory, basically saying that people should, when they go outside to do essential things like going shopping, for example, that they should either wear a mask if they have one or just cover their nose and their mouth with something else like a scarf, for example. Parts of California and New York City itself have already issued that guidance. We're now expecting the White House to issue that guidance nationwide, although it will just be guidance. It won't be mandatory to cover your face when you're out in public. What this is designed to do really is to try and stop the spread of the virus from people who do have COVID-19 but who aren't showing any symptoms. The thinking is changing on this, and experts here in the US and around the world are thinking that if everybody wears a mask, if you have COVID-19 but you don't actually have any symptoms and therefore don't know you have it, then you're much less likely to spread it to other people if you're covering your nose and your mouth.
All right, Charles Gibson in New York, thank you. Now let's take a global look at the COVID-19 pandemic. Worldwide, the number of confirmed cases has passed the 1 million mark in over 200 countries and regions. The United States is reporting more confirmed cases than any other country, with over 245,000. More than half of all cases are in Europe. Italy and Spain are the worst affected. Each has over 115,000 infections. The Chinese mainland reported 31 new cases today, 29 of them imported. There are now over 1,000 cases under observation. In Africa, the number of COVID-19 are gradually rising. 50 nations have so far reported infections. There are now over 7,000 confirmed cases of the coronavirus across the continent. According to the latest data by the Africa Centers for Disease Control on COVID-19 in Africa, 592 people have recovered and 289 people have died from the virus. Now, most African countries have shut their borders, closed schools and banned public gatherings to combat the virus. Let's take a look at the numbers by region on the continent. In North Africa, Algeria still has the highest number of coronavirus cases. Egypt follows closely, while Sudan has the lowest tally. West African countries continue to report new cases. Burkina Faso currently has the most reported cases. Togo has joined other countries in putting in place lockdown measures. Starting Wednesday night, the country will be under a 3-month state of emergency. An indefinite curfew from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. local time has been put in place. Togolese authorities also created a 5,000-member special anti-pandemic task force to enforce these special measures. In Central Africa, Cameroon has the most confirmed cases with 306. The DRC, which continues to deal with the Ebola epidemic, has the second highest recorded cases in the region. In East Africa, the region continues to report the lowest number of confirmed cases. Kenya is the only country in the region to have over 100 cases confirmed. Governments are, however, taking stringent measures to stop the spread of COVID-19. Rwanda is under lockdown until April 19th. In the south of the continent, South Africa continues to record the highest number of cases. The government is enforcing a 21-day lockdown as well as carrying out a mass screening campaign in an effort to stop the spread of COVID-19. Now, South Africa is participating in a public health emergency solidarity trial initiated by the World Health Organization. The clinical study aims to find an effective treatment for COVID-19. Angela Kopla tells us more.
The World Health Organization has convened an independent group of international experts to review evidence from laboratory, animal and clinical studies to prioritize treatments for inclusion in the trial.
The 8 faculties of health sciences, which have all the medical schools in South Africa, have volunteered to participate in this study. And some of the top clinician researchers in the hospitals, in the academic hospitals, have also volunteered to be part of this.
Once all the regulatory approvals have been sorted out, the trial will start. It will use currently available drugs and test patients' reaction and recovery to those drugs.
Patients who are admitted to hospital who are confirmed to have the virus, it means automatically that they're pretty sick to be in hospital. Those patients will be offered one of 5 different interventions, and in that way, by comparing how each intervention performs in terms of preventing progression of the disease and preventing death, we will be able to see if there are indeed some therapies out there that we can then fast track into hospitals and clinics.
This is a holding action as medical researchers race to find a vaccine to cure COVID-19 infections. There are currently 50 vaccines under development.
Vaccine development from nothing to a vaccine that's available does take time, even if we speed it up as much as we possibly can. So we would, if we were lucky, and I am optimistic that we will find 1 or more vaccines that will be able to prevent this infection, but we're probably looking at least 18 months to get to the point where we've got a commercially available vaccine.
As South Africa gets involved in this global effort to find the cure for the coronavirus, it's about the patients and how they're going to react to the different drugs. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Rosebank, South Africa.
Meanwhile, coronavirus cases in South Africa continue to increase despite a 3-week lockdown and a raft of anti-epidemic measures. CGTN's Zulisa Njamela takes a look at what the government plans to implement next.
Health Minister Zweli Mkhize has warned that the coronavirus infections will likely spike in the coming weeks as the country begins to enter the colder winter months. Mkhize indicated that while he is pleased with lower than expected rate of infections in the country, it could prove to be the calm before the storm. Government is therefore introducing new measures to further strengthen the lockdown rules. These include what is called contact tracing. Government will develop and maintain a national database to enable the tracing of persons who are known or reasonably suspected to have come into contact with any person known or reasonably suspected to have contracted COVID-19.
It's not to spy on anyone, it's just to make sure that you may not know who the people who are around you are. One of the gadgets that almost everyone carries with them is a cell phone. Even when people go to whatever, they tend to carry their cell phone. So it's easy to trace through the cell phones.
Those that go and test and they are found to be positive as they fill in their information, it is them, those that have tested positive, that the Department of Health will then seek permission from the ECNS licenses to say, we have these people that have tested positive. Can you therefore give us access to the geolocation?
The biggest change in the new regulations is the inclusion of amendments which will allow permitted individuals to move between provinces and metropolitan and district areas for purposes of transporting a body for burial purposes. Since the announcement of the lockdown on the 26th of March, a number of people have been arrested for breaking the lockdown rules.
We'll make a call that people, they listen to these new regulations and they stick with them so that we are not forced to enforce the law. 2,289 people have been arrested for breaking these regulations.
A few other rules have been relaxed. They include the announcement that spaza shops and informal food traders will stay open. Health Minister Zweli Mkhize has warned that South Africa should be prepared for a sustained increase in infections, but that people should stay calm and continue to observe the lockdown rules. Yolisa Njomela for CGTN in Pretoria, South Africa.
You're watching Africa Live. Time for us to take a quick break. Here's what's still ahead. 2 years in office, we'll look at Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's reform journey.
You're watching breaking news on CGTN.
Welcome to the world today on CGTN.
It has been 2 years since Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed came to power. The Nobel Peace Prize winner introduced a number of political and economic reforms. Many still expect Abiy to redouble efforts in fighting insecurity and ethnic-based violence. CGTN's Girum Chala has more.
Almost 2 years ago, following the resignation of former Prime Minister Haile Mariam Desalegn, the then 41 years old Abiy Ahmed came to power. With him also was introduced the much anticipated all-rounded socio-economic and political reforms. Now, 2 years have passed and they were not easy for Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. Normalizing the then fragile security situation of the country and ethnic-based violence was at the top of his job in the past 2 years. Many say he was more or less successful in those areas. Abiy's economic reform plans were also unprecedented, but gave the Ethiopian economy necessary push forward. The financial sector reinforcement and the encouragement of FDI to the more particularly the industry sector has been instrumental. Personally, and due to the self-brokered peace deal with Eritrea, Abiy Ahmed has earned himself the 2019 Nobel Peace Prize. Many applauded his efforts in Sudan and South Sudan in helping these countries reach out at an amicable, peaceful solution for their decades-old problems. Still, analysts agree Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has a lot more homework on his plate against time, achieving an unshakable peace nationwide, motivating the economy for it to generate more jobs and stage a fair and democratic general elections when the time comes soon. Above and beyond, though, many expect him to defeat the coronavirus pandemic by working hand in hand with the global community. Grumjala CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
The World Food Programme is warning of worsening food challenges in the African Sahel region as humanitarian aid reduces due to the ongoing coronavirus pandemic. According to the UN body, Mali and Burkina Faso are the most affected nations in that region.
As the world combats the spread of the coronavirus, many countries have closed their borders while many flights are grounded. In the Sahel region, the spread of COVID-19 is riding on an already bad situation. There is a worsening state of militancy and food challenges. The World Food Programme warns that humanitarian supplies are reducing.
Some of the bigger companies, and indeed the main suppliers globally, are in countries that are currently under strict confinement and a very reduced level of production. A lot of the nutritious products are produced in India or France, for example, where factories have had to reduce or close or reduce significantly their production. We have big concerns on this, and our supply chain colleagues, together with UNICEF, are looking at locally available enriched foods to complement this.
For the lean season, the upcoming months, June to September, the analysis concluded that we are going from 10.8 million people declared food insecure last year, 2019, to 19.1 million people in 2020. This is an increase of 77% from last year, and it's unprecedented.
WFP experts also say Mali and Burkina Faso could be the most affected, since the number of internally displaced persons has been increasing in the recent past.
Burkina Faso is now, if not the first, at least one of the most or the fastest growing displaced population crisis in the world. It's a country that virtually had no IDPs, internally displaced populations, 18 months ago. And now the latest official figures are in excess of 800,000 people displaced.
The spread of the coronavirus is also exerting pressure on humanitarian aid agencies as they seek to achieve primary measures to protect both locals and aid workers.
We need to limit the number of people that gather, so we need to fragment the number of sites of distribution. The maximum numbers vary from one country to the other, but in general, not more than 50 people can be gathered. And even when those people can be gathered, we are implementing standard operating procedures to minimize the transmission of the disease. So there's a temperature check for all people coming into the distribution sites. And we have to respect 1 meter between every individual coming to get the food assistance.
Years of climate change-related conditions have affected food production in the Sahel. This has lately led to conflicts between herding and farming communities over grazing land. Militant groups affiliated to ISIL and Al-Qaeda networks have exploited these tensions to entrench themselves in the region. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
In Zimbabwe, a serious water shortage in the capital Harare has forced some residents to risk their lives by venturing out at night to fetch the precious commodity. Despite all this struggle, they still don't get enough water to meet their needs, and some of the groundwater they fetch remains unsafe to drink. CGTN's Farai Mokutuya tells us more.
It's nightfall. the time people begin winding down and preparing to rest. Not so for Otilia Binda. This is the time she starts the search for water. Chitungwiza, some 30 kilometers from Harare, is one of the worst affected areas by a water crisis. The daily requirement here is 75 megaliters. Supply is a mere 2. Boreholes are now the primary source of water. Because of demand, fetching it has become a round-the-clock chore.
It's better to go out at night because there will be fewer people then.
Residents are limited to 2 buckets per day. Not enough for laundry work, which has to be done at a nearby river, or for cleaning the toilets.
Tomorrow morning, we will wash our faces, do the dishes, and mop the floors with whatever water is left.
After that, she'll repeat her nightly routine alongside hundreds of others. It's mostly women that have the responsibility of fetching water, placing themselves in danger by doing it at night. However, they say the risks of not having this precious but scarcely available resource are just as bad. Cholera and typhoid outbreaks occur frequently, and now there's a new scare.
We are scared of the coronavirus because we don't have enough water to wash our hands and practice personal hygiene.
Though they are a lifeline, these boreholes are also a potential hazard.
There were 2 researches that were done. The first one by Upper Manyame Catchment Council, looking at our groundwater reserves. We don't have aquifers, we don't have enough groundwater resources. So that the sinking of bores is the main access points is what is actually happening in Chitungwiza. Epworth has got the same problems also. Has constrained our groundwater resources. Then secondly, the researches that were also done by EMA have confirmed that our groundwater is not safe.
Municipal authorities blame the deterioration on defaulting ratepayers. They have identified 2 new dams to increase supplies, but with those projects several years from materializing, the search for water by day and night is likely to remain the norm. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Chitungwiza, Zimbabwe.
The Congo River is the Earth's deepest river, carrying 1.25 million cubic feet of water. The river is, however, becoming threatened by environmental degradation in the Congo forest, and researchers are working on regional interventions to save it. CGTN's Daniel Arap Moi brings us more in this report.
Freshwater habitats account for some of the richest biodiversity in Congo-Brazzaville. And Congo River is a vital and vibrant ecosystem for many species.
The Congo River is one of Africa's greatest rivers, flowing thousands of kilometers across several countries. But the biggest worry now is pollution in Brazzaville that is threatening the existence of this river. Many say unless the government takes further steps to protect this river, the future may be bleak.
The misuse of this river is really bad for the environment, and as fishermen who depend on this river for our daily survival, we continue to see fish dying because of the plastics thrown into the river. And if we are not careful, this river and the fish species in it may cease to exist unless we change our habits of polluting the environment.
Many rivers across Africa fail to meet required health standards and face multiple threats, putting an increasing pressure on the diverse wildlife that call rivers home.
There are very few rivers in Africa that flow as fast as the Congo River as it approaches the sea. This river has the potential of producing electricity that can supply not only Congo-Brazzaville, but many other countries across the region. But away from that, the Congo River is a source of livelihood for hundreds of thousands of Congolese who depend on it on a daily.
This river is very important to me because everything I do depends on this river, including money for paying school fees for my children, buying food. So basically my entire life depends on the river.
A variety of fish species sold across markets in Brazzaville come from the Congo River. If put to good use, the Congo River can generate wealth for millions of Congolese. And that's how fundamental the Congo River is. Daniel Arap Moi, CGTN, Congo Brazzaville.
Some wives in Somalia are rejoicing as khat traders despair. That's because the coronavirus pandemic has halted the supply of the herb to the Horn of Africa nation. The Somali government has banned all international flights, including flights importing khat from neighboring Kenya. CGTN's Noel Mokugu reports.
Before the COVID-19 pandemic, Muna Nur Farah had begun to strongly dislike her husband. He would come back home at 3 in the morning with empty pockets, his money squandered on the narcotic leaf khat. But the situation has changed a little over a week ago as the coronavirus began to spread throughout East Africa. To curb the disease, the Somali government banned all international flights, including those that import khat from neighboring Kenya. The ban has deprived men like Muna's husband the addictive herb.
My husband was ferocious. He would come home at 3 a.m. Now that the khat is gone, my husband comes home early. Coronavirus is deadly. It may kill us, but at last khat was banned because of it.
Kenya exports about 50,000 kilograms of khat to Somalia each day. Somali men often gather in groups to chew the leaf, a mild stimulant, and chat into the early hours of the morning.
Khat took all my money. I hid a lot. I would delay going for prayers. I would hear the call from the mosque, but instead a group of men and I would head to tea kiosk to chew khat.
According to a 2019 article from the Kenya Medical Research Institute, more than 10 million people globally use khat. Due to the khat ban by the Somali government, the association's leaders say they'll be looking at a total devastation. Khat is highly perishable. It is usually driven from airfield to the market at breakneck speed. Some khat sellers have started shipping the leaf in, but the prices have immensely shot up. Before the coronavirus pandemic, a kilo would go for $20. Now, the same kilo costs about $200 to $300 US. Noel Mokugu, CGTN.
All right, let's now cross over to Uche for the day's business news.
Thank you, Peninah. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Ethiopia inks a historic $800 million geothermal power purchase deal. And the IMF calls for wartime measures to stabilize the global economy.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
Well, let's start off in Ethiopia. The country has signed a power purchase agreement worth $800 million with the developers of a geothermal plant. Now, the deal is one of the first mega public-private partnership projects in Ethiopia since the government opened up its energy sector to private players. Tulumoye Geothermal Operations aims to produce at least 150 megawatts of electricity in 2 phases. The construction of the project and first phase of 50 megawatts electricity production of energy is expected to be completed in 2023. Ethiopia has the second biggest electricity deficit in Africa. Despite that, however, about 2/3 of its population still lack a connection to the grid. Now, the International Monetary Fund says policymakers must put wartime economic measures in place in order to ensure global stability. It is the latest warning from the organization that's trying to keep economies afloat with emergency funds. Here's CGTN's Nick Harper with more from Washington.
The doors are closed, but the work has to keep going. The International Monetary Fund's headquarters in Washington, D.C. was shuttered 2 weeks ago after 2 staff tested positive for COVID-19. IMF teams are still keeping the world funded during these extraordinary times.
A key concern about
a long-lasting impact of the sudden stop of the world economy is the risk of a wave of bankruptcies and layoffs that not only can undermine the recovery, but can erode the fabric of our societies.
The IMF has pledged that no one should die from coronavirus due to a lack of funding. It's made $50 billion available to help low-income countries and emerging markets. And it said that it's ready to use its $1 trillion lending capacity to help all those who need it.
Over 80 countries have placed requests and more are likely to come. And normally we never have had more than a handful of requests at any one time.
The organisation's annual spring meetings will move to a virtual format to ensure countries' economies remain as stable as possible.
We know from past crises, the problem is that if somebody loses his job for a long time, they lose skills and have difficulty to come back into the labour market. We know if non-performing loans are allowed to build up on a large scale, it impairs households and banks and financial institutions' balance sheets, and it makes it, that will be a drag on the recovery also.
The lender says a combined strategy is vital. Containment must go hand in hand with strengthening healthcare systems, and putting recovery plans in place now will enable economies to pick up once the health crisis is over. The IMF is predicting a global recovery next year in 2021, but it says for that to happen, countries must prevent liquidity problems now, as those may lead to a much longer-lasting collapse of industries and labour markets. Nick Harper, CGTN, Washington.
And to Nigeria now, the country has begun rolling out a cash transfer scheme for its poorest and most vulnerable households. Now, each beneficiary will receive payments for the next 4 months in order to help cushion the effects of a lockdown amidst the COVID-19 outbreak. Here's CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam reporting.
Stacks of cash on display for disbursement, and online to receive them are selected citizens of Kwali, a local council in the Nigerian capital, Abuja. The city is one out of 3 states currently under a lockdown due to the coronavirus pandemic, and the hardship is beginning to take its toll on vulnerable households who cannot afford basic supplies. The government intervention will disburse a total $50 per beneficiary.
We give them monthly stipends of $5,000 every month. And now that we have these restrictions, Mr. President has directed we give 2 months advance payment.
The cash transfer program is about lifting the poor who are hitherto not able to meet their basic nutritional requirements and lacking in human capital to be able to improve their consumption, improve their human capital by sending their children to school, by practicing good hygiene, by taking lessons on how to improve their livelihood, and then finally to be able to move out of the poor, move above the poverty line.
Close to half of Nigeria's 200 million population are considered extremely poor by the World Bank. No less than 1 million of them would benefit from the government intervention. Mother of 4, Salamatu Saliu, says the fund will go a long way to help her and her family.
I will take the money home, after which I will take out a portion to purchase foodstuff for my children. Then I will use the rest of the money to start a petty business for myself.
This intervention would be replicated across the country. Since 2016, the federal government has used conditional cash transfers as a poverty alleviation measure. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN, Abuja, Nigeria.
Meanwhile, the World Bank says that around 20% of South Africa's gross national output comes from the informal economy, and between 25 and 30% of South Africans who are presently working operate in the informal economy. But the coronavirus pandemic has forced the government to announce a 21-day lockdown. So how exactly are informal traders surviving in the country? Here's CGTN's Alexandra Majala with a look.
68-year-old great-grandmother Lucy Malimele started selling fruits and vegetables at Soweto's Cliptown Market in 1983. Over the years, she has relied on the trade to feed her family, including 8 grandchildren. Her trading stand was buzzing with activity before the 21-day lockdown started in South Africa. Despite the lockdown, the vegetable trader has no choice but to violate the curfew for her business and family's survival.
There is no business, meaning the business is dead, unless I break the law like currently. I say I got some produce which is not allowed, but I went to get it. Being here is not even allowed.
Aside from the struggle to put food on the table, a large portion of the population struggles with maintaining hygiene and social distancing.
I need food and money to support the children. We also need proper housing. Our toilets are not okay. They are outside and we have to go there in groups. Even the taps we use all at the same time. I don't know how we're supposed to cope during this time.
Africa's most advanced economy has announced tax relief for small businesses to cushion financial losses suffered by firms due to the pandemic. These include a new tax subsidy of 500 Rand per month for each worker to employers for the next 4 months, and also permit businesses with revenue of $2.7 million or less to delay paying 20% of their employees' tax liabilities over the next 4 months. But no support has yet been offered to the informal sector, which Statistics South Africa estimates accounts for around 6 to 7% of the economy. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
Now, the EU ambassador to Tunisia, Patrice Bergamini, has announced that the European Union will allow the immediate disbursement of almost $272 million in budgetary support for Tunisia. Now, this will be in the form of donations to help the North African nation contain its COVID-19 outbreak and, of course, mitigate against the economic impact. Here's CGTN's Adnan Shaushi with more.
EU ambassador in Tunis said the decision was announced by European Commissioner for European Neighbourhood Policy and Enlargement negotiations at a telephone conversation with Tunisian Foreign Affairs Minister Nuruddin al-Rai.
The Tunisian diplomacy is stepping up efforts to get more financial and health support from its international partners to provide more equipment and medicines to face this crisis.
The EU also announced that funds earmarked for the health sector support program in Tunisia will be beefed up, as they will increase from 20 million euros for the 13 governorates to 60 million for the 24 regions in the country.
The EU is providing a package of loans, donations and support funds to tackle COVID-19. The economic repercussions will hit all sectors and activities. The EU stands with Tunisia. Now, it's necessary to set our national priorities.
The Finance Commission at the Tunisian Parliament stressed its readiness to interact with legislative requests from the government to overcome the current crisis.
The EU has made an important step, but in reality, all this money will not be enough to face the social and economic bomb that will hit Tunisia. We urge the government to accelerate the pace of support to the most vulnerable classes to avoid more social tension amid the coronavirus crisis.
The Tunisian African Business Council has called for the immediate formation of an economic and social council, including experts with experience in crisis management and privileged relations with international donors, in order to save the economic fabric in the context of the coronavirus pandemic. The Minister of Finance stressed that the situation is becoming increasingly difficult and complex. He added that the government is working to find ways to finance the state budget and mobilize new resources to manage the additional costs caused by the COVID-19 crisis. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Now, since the first cases of COVID-19 in Africa, artists around the globe have been trying to educate people on the disease through various methods. In Senegal, graffiti artists from Dakar have launched a hashtag Corona Graffiti Challenge on social media. The campaign requires one to paint a graffiti wall every day in order to sensitize the community about the COVID-19 pandemic. CGTN's Beryl Oro has the details.
Doctor is a graffiti artist based in Dakar. He's painting a wall in front of one of the biggest markets in town, hoping to educate residents on COVID-19. Through this painting, Doctor indicates the gestures recommended by the World Health Organization that can help stop the spread of the virus. He also paints the toll-free numbers of the Ministry of Health in Senegal.
For 30 years now, graffiti has been in Senegal. Graffiti has always been committed to raising awareness in different subjects that are happening. So today, we are bringing out contribution to the fight. As artists, as citizens, we do it to educate people, to lead them to respect health guidelines. We use walls because we know the impact it has directly on populations.
Like many countries, Senegal has taken necessary measures to help curb the spread of COVID-19. The Ministry of Health has advised people to wash their hands and cover their mouths and noses when sneezing or coughing. However, many fail to apply these measures. The graffiti paintings attract several people who stop by to take selfies as they engage in discussions about the coronavirus pandemic.
Naturally, we all have to be mobilized. If we love our country, each of us must do the same. We must try to inform and sensitize each at their own level. No one should ignore the seriousness of this disease.
I am really proud to see this work in my neighborhood. It is really nice. I think it will help a lot in the national awareness because visual communication is much more accessible to people. It reaches all social groups. At a glance, you can understand the message.
The Senegalese government has announced it will set aside about $2.2 million to fight the pandemic. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz, but ahead on Global Business Africa, OPEC Plus calls for an all oil producers virtual meeting in order to help stem the fall of crude prices. All that coming up top of the hour. For now, back to you, Peninah.
Thank you, Uche. You're watching Africa Live. Let's have a look at what's coming up in sports. All right, I'm told we just proceed on to sports. So the Swimming South Africa has announced that all swimming events will be put on hold for the time being as the country comes to grips with the impact of the coronavirus. This has left many swimmers and coaches stressed out as the preparations for the Olympic Games have had to be altered. CGTN's Duplessis has more.
It is a frustrating time for all aspiring Olympic swimmers who are running out of time to qualify for the event in Tokyo. And now, after the postponement of several events, including the National Championships at the end of April, it is time for coaches and swimmers to regroup and get back to basics.
I told them to work on their weaknesses now because we're going back into base training. So there's always aspects to work on. And so this is the time to work on the weaknesses. And then during the break, I want them to have a complete, total mental and physical break.
The pressure to qualify is a thing of the past for the likes of Commonwealth Games gold medalist Tatiana Schoonmaker and for several of Coach Rocco Meyring's squad. But for many others, the pressure and uncertainty has intensified.
Tatiana and Kayleen both qualified, so that monkey is off their back. The other swimmers that I've coached, one from Seychelles, two from Botswana, they have also qualified. Luckily, I'm not in that difficult situation where other coaches and athletes are that have to bank on trials to qualify.
Meyring says he has given his swimmers time to process the impact the COVID-19 virus has had on the swimming calendar, but has assured them that plans are in place to deal with any postponement or any further delays.
We put our lives on hold for 4 years planning for it. I don't want to speculate, at this stage we are preparing for the games starting on the 24th of July in Japan. And we are also ready for a postponement. You have to have a plan B in place.
Swimming is the latest sports code to be affected by the coronavirus, with 19 events scheduled for the next 6 weeks suspended by Swimming South Africa. It leaves the country's swimmers floating about in limbo at a crucial time when all their focus is on bettering their personal bests, qualifying for the Olympics and timing their performance peak for the right time in order to make a big splash in Japan. CS Duplessis, CGTN, Pretoria.
Former marathon world record holder Wilson Kipsang was among 20 people arrested by police for breaking the curfew laws in Kenya. The two-time London marathon champion spent the night in police custody for allegedly drinking past the stipulated hours. Kenya is on a daily dawn-to-dusk curfew to contain the spread of coronavirus spread in the country, as confirmed cases spiked to 122 with 4 deaths. Kipsang, who won bronze at the 2012 London Olympics, is currently serving a provisional suspension for anti-doping rule violations. In England,